Hello, my global family. Welcome to another episode of the Global Yaadie podcast. I'm your host, Dayne. Thanks for tuning in. Now, the Caribbean is more than just sun, sand, and sea. It's a region that's deeply connected to the ocean through our work, our daily lives, our culture, and even our survival. Now, beyond the national waters lies a vast, unregulated ocean called the high seas. 2/3 of the ocean comprises of this high seas. So the high seas are important for regulating climate, biodiversity, and overall the health of our marine environment. And in this episode of the Global Yaadie podcast, we're exploring the environmental and economic impacts of the high seas and why this matters for the Caribbean. And joining us today, we have a leading marine scientist and ocean governance expert, Dr. Dayne Buddo. Dr. Buddo, welcome to the Global Yaadie podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Happy to hear that. First and foremost, what are the high seas and why does it matter for the Caribbean?
Well, firstly, if you think about where do we call the high seas? Every country has what's called an exclusive economic zone. So for islands in the Caribbean, this is 200 miles from their landmass. So 200 miles out, that's ours. If you're talking about Jamaica, that's Jamaica's to use and fish, and that's ours to govern. Outside of that, that's where the high seas are. But as you can imagine, with Caribbean countries, especially the ones in this Eastern Caribbean, they're pretty close, much closer than 200 miles away. So we have, we can't get a full exclusive economic zone, but anything outside of that, it's the high seas. But in the Caribbean, there's no really place in the Caribbean itself, in the basin of the Caribbean, that's called the high seas. High seas is outside of the Caribbean region. So when we think about how the Caribbean functions with the high seas, we think regionally, not necessarily by country.
Okay. All right. And so the focus of this episode as well, when we're talking about the high seas, is this new global treaty called the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. And so we're going to also be exploring in this episode how does it relate to, the high seas or the Caribbean countries and so forth, and what are the implications for environmental and economic future. And I had to plug this because if it's called Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, how does this all intersect and relate to our responsibility?
If you think about what is biodiversity is the variety of life.
Yes.
It's plants and animals, and in the marine environment, you're talking about ocean life. All the fish, all the plants, all of that is biodiversity within the ocean. We depend on this. And it's not just the fish that we like to eat, but it's also the fish that those fish like to eat. That's the only reason why they're there. So the biodiversity is this harmonious, state that we want to make sure is happening between plants, animals, and the environment. If the diversity goes down, it will have that domino effect on us, our use of these marine resources. We depend on them. So there is a distinct link between nature and people. These ecosystem services, as they call it, we get that from nature. As human beings, we need certain things, basic things, food and shelter. We need somewhere, we need space, and we need food to survive. The ocean provides oxygen. Half the oxygen that we breathe in is coming from the ocean. So the health of the ocean directly links to the health of human beings.
Biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, BB, and I'm saying it so that it can soak in. So I'm trying to understand how that all comes together, because for persons who, there's fisher folk, there are people who work in tourism, all of us are so interconnected to this. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I'm just trying to understand how is it that we should see ourselves as, how do we connect to this treaty and why at a time like this is it important for us to consider what this treaty means?
Well, I can tell you, we've been trying to get this BB&J Treaty, this high seas treaty, for decades, over 20 years, passed through the United Nations and for countries to sign on and for it to be entered into force. 20 years. We're 20 years late on this. We should have been doing this many decades ago. These areas beyond national jurisdiction means it doesn't belong to a particular country. It's not governed by a particular country. It's kind of like the Wild West. It's It doesn't belong to anyone, but it belongs to everyone.
Wild waters.
Wild waters, exactly. So how can you manage an area that's so vast, 2/3 the size of the ocean? It belongs in the high seas. How is that linked? So the thing about the ocean is that things move. The fish move. The plant life move. They move all around. Highly migratory species like sharks and whales and cetaceans like dolphins and all these things, they move from areas to outside of the region, the Caribbean region in this case, into the Caribbean region, providing all of those ecosystem services, that balance, that food, that tourism aspect of it.
Right.
We depend on that. So although persons in Caribbean islands don't realize where the high seas are, most of the people in Caribbean can't swim, so there's already a disconnect. There's already a disconnect with the ocean.
Yes.
Right? A physical disconnect with the ocean. And then you're asking persons to don't look underneath, under the surface,
Yes.
what's in water. So understanding the link, people will respond to the economics, people respond to survival, coastal erosion, people respond to oxygen, people respond to food. Right? And these are all intimately linked with the high seas. We are getting all of these services, all of these resources from the high seas. It is feeding the Caribbean region, and we must make sure that we are playing a part in protecting it as well.
I was gonna say amen, amen to that. But so the treaty, the BB&J Treaty, is also looking to establish marine protected areas in international waters. Remember, it's a beyond national jurisdiction. So how does establishing these protected areas benefit Caribbean ecosystems or, the marine sector?
Well, if you think about what a marine protected area is, it's not
Tell
just
us.
a marine protected area is not just drawing a line around a space and hoping for the best.
Okay.
Right? This is a replenishment zone. This is where we are hoping that the marine resources can be bolstered, their numbers can go up, they can be more successful, they can thrive, and then they will spill out of these protected areas and provide for us. If we could have turned the clock back by 50 years, we should have gotten these things done. Not wait for it to be overfished, overexploited. We should have been protecting it so that it's sustainable. We're feeding off that interest. You think about a bank account, and you have this large amount of money, those resources in that bank account, and it's gaining interest. We use the interest and we still keep that capital inside of it. All of those resources that are reproducing, they are replenishing, they are growing for us. But it has to be a certain level for it to produce and for it to survive, make us survive. We are well beneath that level. So now you have to put in marine protected areas to bring that back up to a certain sustainable standard where it can provide for us easily. Marine resources are a renewable resource. We don't have to feed it, we don't have to plant it, we don't have to take care of it. Just let them do what they do. We have to give them the opportunity to renew, and that's what we use.
When I was listening to you, I was like interpreting it also like what we own and have control over. Maybe we haven't been managing it as well, and so now we're going further, going beyond to see how we can, manage those resources well, tap into it to assist us.
Well, it's a difficult thing, and this will never be straightforward or easy to implement. It will never be, especially because of the geographical location of these high seas. We're barely struggling in the Caribbean. We're barely managing in the Caribbean. We're struggling to manage the EEZ, and in most cases,
EEZ?
the exclusive economic zone, that 200-mile radius around these islands.
You said that.
Right? But we are barely managing this nearshore areas to protect those nearshore areas. It takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of willpower and commitment to manage these areas. What about outside? These high seas are far, they're hard to get to. So if you think about managing those kind of areas, it's going to come with significant challenges, especially for countries that have low capacity, low technical capacity, low financial capacity to participate. But we have to, as a region, pull together and play our part in protecting those high seas.
And speaking of significant challenge, climate change, a significant challenge, and recognizing the role that the high seas play, what implications does that have for, regulating the region's climate and also the marine resources?
So there is a unmistakable link between ocean health and climate change. Healthier ocean withstands the effects of climate change. It stabilizes the climate. The climate is driven by the oceans. So if you think about what has happened in the last 20 years in the Caribbean, hurricanes have increased in frequency. They have increased in intensity. We're getting more often and higher intensity hurricanes. And these are hammering our islands. We don't even have time to recover. And another one comes again. All right? So if you understand the link between ocean health and climate, this is where we have to make sure that we're protecting those high seas. The oxygen source and the carbon sink that the ocean provides, it's taking out all of that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, reducing that level of acidity that we don't want to have in the ocean. It is soaking that up. And that's one of the things that we have to make sure. So we're talking about ocean acidification. And that affects, if you think about when you're, when I was in school, I did this little experiment where you put vinegar, a mild acid, on an egg, and you wash it. You watch it get softer, and because it's dissolving all of these things. When the ocean gets acidic, it's dissolving all these calcareous eggs, these calcium-rich eggs. They're destroying the ability of crustaceans to actually build shells. All of these things are intricately linked, and persons not recognizing that. But what they see it is when fish stocks are going down. Fish are getting more expensive because the vessels have to go further, they have to stay longer, expend more fuel. So when they're coming back with catch, it's becoming more expensive. So we have to make sure we understand the link between the high seas and the oceans in general, and with our own food security, our own livelihoods. We have to purchase these things.
And I was going to say lifestyle, because some
Lifestyle as
people
well.
want to eat more fish than chicken now, and
And
you
we're
got to think
encouraging
about
people
what
to
that
eat more
means.
fish because it's healthier. It's healthier than other things. A lot of essential oils. We want people to eat more fish. But we want to make sure that people are eating healthier, but not at the demise of the fish stocks, which we need to get back up.
All right, and so I know you gave us the bank analogy, and now we've come into the more economic impact of the ocean, of the high seas. And so are there like any untapped economic opportunities when we think about the BB&J Treaty?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have to think about, of course, there's a fisheries impact, right? But also the exploration aspect of things. There's a lot of medicinal biotechnology opportunities that can be derived from the high seas without causing any, negative environmental impact. And we're not talking about deep sea mining now. We're not, right? Because that has a significant amount of environmental impact that we have to be carefully watching and managing and avoid as much as possible. However, we have animals and plants that can be utilized, and the chemicals they produce can be utilized for medicines, can be utilized for different food sources and additives that can, of course, enrich our lives. The capacity of countries to tap into those deep sea areas, there's not many countries that can tap into that. However, as a region, and I keep stressing a regional approach,
Right.
pool those resources for the region. Stop thinking like a country. No man is an island.
Yes.
But
no one, I was going to say, explores alone.
Exactly. We need to collaborate. We need to coordinate. We need to pool our resources. And of course, have that, access to benefits, equity in that as well. And that's one of the things we have to be careful of. I mean, on the flip side of the high seas treaty, fishing has been going on in the high seas for many, many years, especially large-scale commercial fishing for tunas, etc. These vessels, once a marine protected area has been established in the high seas,
Yes.
they need to go somewhere else. They can't fish in those marine protected areas anymore. where will they be going?
Yeah. And so what does that mean for their economic, what are the economic implications of
Well,
that?
this is a business for them as well.
Yes.
So apart from the food security of the people who are depending on this food,
Yes.
there is an economic aspect of it. There's a business aspect. These are thriving businesses. They're hiring people. They're providing monies for the countries that they belong to. However, they have to then find somewhere else to be. And this is where I am concerned about the capacity of Caribbean countries to be able to withstand unregulated fisheries, illegal fisheries in our waters. Right now, Jamaica, for example, has a large EEZ, a large exclusive economic zone, an area that we have to then monitor and police and regulate. And we're still having infractions of illegal fishing going on. When the BB&J Treaty comes in, you're then opening up yourself to even more of that.
Yes.
Where's that money going to come from to police it more? So it has to be a global effort to monitor vessels. You have vessel monitoring systems, you have response systems, and we have to come together as a region to look at it in that way, because we don't want to open up ourselves for increased threats from illegal fishing as well.
Like, you just preempted my next question, because I was going to ask now about what are some of the risks and threats, if it is that we're not aligning, these efforts in relation to the BB&J Treaty and how we navigate the high seas.
Yeah, we have to negotiate as a region. We're talking about negotiations and how this will be implemented. It's a lot more powerful if we negotiate as a region. So at the CARICOM level, for example, or Latin American Caribbean region, we have to come together on that global platform. How can other countries assist our region to build the capacity to manage, to withstand any negative fallout from the high seas treaty being put into place? We have to look at the technology. We have to increase that. We have to increase the capacity for surveillance. All of these things we need to negotiate. If any country signs on to this treaty and it enters into force, they are legally obligated to protect the high seas.
Say that again.
Once a country signs on to the convention and is entered into force, they are legally bound. International law will legally bind them to protect the high seas. But they have to be able to.
I was gonna.
They have to be able to. And
Yes.
this is where the negotiation has to come through. All of these places, countries have never even been to the high seas, much less now to participate in the protection of the high seas.
Right.
So those kind of capacity have to be baked in to the high seas treaty to make sure countries are not disadvantaged by it.
Yes, and I want to also bring it. You've been spinning a very good picture of all of what we had to take into consideration. But recently I've been exposed to the work of a lot of local communities in what it means to be managing the resources. And you just spoke to the fact that national governments or our countries, we have challenges managing and monitoring unregulated and illegal fishing. So what happens when we open up ourselves in that kind of way? And so while you spoke about the collective action that needs to happen on the part of country governments, is there anything else in addition to mobilizing as a whole that we can take to benefit from tapping into this new dimension of ocean governance?
This is where we reach out to our allies. This is where we reach out to countries that we've been working with so far. This is where communities come together. Right? This treaty will bring the world together. This is a game changer. Only if we allow it to be. Right? Only if we make sure that we work together on this. We all depend on the high seas.
Yes.
And the moment we recognize that this affects our individual survival, that is when we'll be working together. So for communities on that level, speak to your elected officials, move it up the chain. Every single fishing community will depend on the ocean. And it's not just their tiny pocket of ocean that they like as a fishing ground. That fishing ground, their favorite fishing ground, is affected by the high seas. It benefits from the survival of the high seas and the proliferation of animals in the high seas. It's all connected. The ocean is fluid. You can't fence off a barrier in the ocean. It moves. Everything moves.
Yes.
Right?
So
So we have to make sure that we are looking at that kind of link.
you're right. So here's a question I actually really, when I was trying to get that question out just now, this is the question I really wanted to ask to better understand it. So when you mentioned that if countries sign on to the BB&J Treaty, they're legally bound to protect the high seas. So, for example, in a situation where you have fishing wardens and so, does it mean then that those wardens will now have more, I can't even say ground, more waters to monitor and protect? It means that they'll be venturing out.
I think
Does it look like that in a local space?
I think those kind of arrangements, those are the kind of things that need to work out, right? And that's where the implementation of the high seas treaties has to happen. Who's going to do it? Who's going to pay for it? How is it going to be done? Right? The benefit of it now versus 20 plus years ago is that we have a lot more technology right now, right? We have a lot more regulation when it comes to maritime traffic. This is not small vessels going out there.
Right.
This is not canoes going out on the high seas. These are large ocean-going vessels
Okay.
that are a lot more regulated by the International Maritime Organization. 25 years ago, not so much. The technology wasn't there, you know. So right now we stand a better chance to implement those kind of regulations, those kind of actions than it was 20 years ago.
I see. I see. So I think you touched on it a little bit in it, and speaking to the reason all of us have to come together, and that's pretty much the only way we're gonna navigate the challenges that are thrown at us. But people still listening and say, yeah, well, it's always about what role is in it for me. So obviously the persons who are on the front line, so in the coastal communities, the marines and fisheries sector, they have their work cut out for them. The writing is on the wall, but what does it mean for other persons in terms of it? Because the conversation is always around how do we connect it to people. While we would have said it's linked to our daily lives and the food and the lifestyle, what does it mean for person? How do we encourage other people really to care about the high seas?
Well, I mean, if you think about an island like Jamaica, right, everything is so linked to the ocean. If we did not have a healthy ocean, we'll never have a tourism product like what we have right now. Think about how many persons are employed by tourism. If we did not have a healthy ocean, think about how much fish would not be eaten or consumed. I mean, so for some people, this is their main source of protein.
Yes.
Right? And the Caribbean doesn't consume as much from the ocean as other countries, where sometimes in other countries, like even in some areas in Africa, they depend on this protein, this fish protein, as their main source of protein all the time. In the Caribbean, is sometimes, we depend a lot more on, land-based source of protein. But ocean-based source of protein for many countries, that's the main source. So linking the food, linking the tourism, linking the economic growth, linking just appreciation of a healthy environment. When you go to the beach for recreation with your family, you want to have a healthy space to have quality time with your family. So there's a value for that. It may not be an economic value that you can easily measure. I pay for this. But what would you be willing to pay to keep your ocean healthy? I mean, think about that. And that's how you value a resource like that. If you want it to stick around, if you want to make sure that you can turn up on a fishing beach and get fish for your home, what are we willing to pay to keep that going? Not just for me, but what about my children? I want them to be able to understand, you know what? You can eat healthy from the ocean, but in a very sustainable way. How do we get back to that point? We've overexploited pretty much every single fish stock. Every single one. To the point where it's dropped off the cliff, it plummeted all the way down. That will take decades for them to come back. But here is where the high seas treaty is powerful. You're then protecting significant areas. The larger the area you protect, the more opportunity you're giving those resources to bounce back. And that's what we want.
So the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty, it's really about the health of our ocean ecosystems, the future of our economic livelihoods and overall beyond our cultural identity or our survival, really. And so we want to thank you, Dr. Dayne Buddo, for sharing such a wealth of insights as it relates to the importance of the high seas and this new global treaty and game changer for our blue economy, the BB&J Treaty. So thanks again for coming, and we really appreciate all that you've been doing in the vast, I don't want to say unregulated, I was going to say the vast ocean space and more. So to learn more about the high seas, you can visit the High Seas Alliance. So their website is highseasalliance.org. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Global Yaadie. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and do what you can to protect our high seas. Thank you.